My husband stood in our bedroom doorway laughing as he ordered me to pack my bags and leave our home. He was entirely convinced I was a weak, dependent wife who would end up sleeping on the streets without his money. I calmly zipped my suitcase, walked past him, and offered a simple smile. He had absolutely no idea that in less than 24 hours, his entire financial empire would be reduced to ashes, and I would be the one holding the match. I am Claire, 33 years old, and I work as a senior financial auditor for a major corporate firm in Chicago. Before I tell you exactly how I dismantled my husband's life, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to outsmart someone who thought they could destroy you. For 7 years, I was the quiet and supportive partner to Harrison, my 36-year-old husband who worked as a supply chain executive. I had funded his logistics startup with my own savings and managed his ledgers when he could not afford an accountant. I thought we were building an empire together. Instead, I was just funding my own replacement. It was exactly 2 in the morning when the final confrontation erupted, tearing through the quiet of our suburban home. I was standing in the center of our master bedroom holding a printed copy of a credit card statement. It was an exclusive corporate card that Harrison thought he had successfully hidden from me. But you do not hide financial trails from a senior auditor. You just leave breadcrumbs. The statement highlighted a single glaring transaction: $15,000 spent at a high-end jeweler in downtown Chicago. Harrison stormed into the room, ripping his tie off his neck with violent, jerky movements. The smell of expensive bourbon lingered in the air, a clear sign he had been out celebrating. When he saw the paper in my hand, his face did not drop. He did not look guilty. Instead, his features contorted into a mask of pure, condescending rage. "You are insane, Claire," he spat, his voice dropping into that dangerous, patronizing tone he used whenever he wanted to make me feel small. "Are you seriously digging through my mail now? Is this what you do with your boring life?" "I did not need to dig through your mail, Harrison," I replied, my voice dangerously calm. I did not yell. Yelling implies a loss of control, and I was entirely in control. "The corporate card is linked to the joint business account I helped you set up 5 years ago. You forgot to sever the digital routing. $15,000 on a diamond tennis bracelet. Unless you plan on wearing it to your next board meeting, I suggest you start explaining." Harrison let out a sharp, mocking laugh. He stepped closer, towering over me, trying to use his physical presence to intimidate me. "It is a corporate gift for a major client. Not that you would understand how high-level networking operates. You sit in a cubicle crunching numbers for other people. You do not build empires." "A corporate gift," I repeated, tasting the sheer audacity of the lie. "A corporate gift for Sienna." Sienna was 25 years old. She was Harrison's newest subordinate, a junior logistics coordinator who had been working at his company for barely 8 months. I had met her twice at company dinners. She had looked at my husband with undisguised hunger, and he had looked back at her with the smug satisfaction of a man who loved being worshipped. Harrison's jaw tightened. The mention of her name pierced his armor of plausible deniability. But true to his narcissistic nature, instead of backing down, he doubled down, escalating the conflict with a viciousness that took my breath away. He grabbed the bank statement from my hand, crumpled it into a ball, and threw it at my chest. "You know what? Yes," he sneered, his eyes dark with malice. "It is for Sienna. Because Sienna actually appreciates what I do. Sienna does not come home smelling like stale coffee, nagging me about profit margins and compliance laws. She knows how to treat a successful man." He pointed a finger directly at my face. "You are suffocating me, Claire. You are boring, you are rigid, and you are draining the life out of me. I am a millionaire executive, and I deserve someone who matches my energy, not an exhausted accountant who acts like my mother." The sheer cruelty of his words was meant to break me. He wanted me to cry. He wanted me to fall to my knees, beg for counseling, and promise to change to fit whatever twisted mold he required. I felt a cold clinical detachment wash over me. The woman who had loved him died right there on the hardwood floor of our bedroom. In her place, the auditor woke up. "I gave you the seed money to start that company, Harrison." I stated, my tone devoid of any emotion. "I managed your ledgers when you could not afford a professional. This house was purchased with my excellent credit score because yours was ruined from your reckless 20s. And who pays the mortgage now? He roared, his face turning red. Me, I built this life. You just coasted on my hard work. He strode over to my closet, yanked the doors open, and grabbed a large suitcase from the top shelf. He hurled it onto the floor at my feet. It hit the ground with a loud, hollow thud. Get out! Harrison commanded, his voice dripping with venomous authority. Get out of my house, right now. Pack your cheap suits and your boring shoes and get out. You think you are so smart. Let us see how smart you are when you are sleeping in a cheap motel. You have nothing without me, Claire. Nothing. Your miserable salary will not even cover rent in a decent neighborhood. I am cutting you off. Every perfectly pressed shirt I placed into that suitcase represented a late night I had spent auditing his quarterly returns. Every pair of shoes was bought with money I had earned while he was out dining with his new favorite employee. I folded my clothes with the meticulous precision of a woman cataloging evidence. He stood by the door, clearly frustrated that I was not giving him the hysterical reaction he craved. He needed me to be a victim so he could feel like a conqueror, but I simply refused to play his game. He honestly thought that without his company income, I would wither away into nothing. He forgot that I was the one who structured his corporate accounts. I knew where every single penny was buried. I looked at the open suitcase on the floor, then back at the man who had just discarded our 7-year marriage for a 25-year-old subordinate. There was no love left in his gaze, only a toxic, arrogant need for control. My mind was already moving 10 steps ahead, visualizing the spreadsheets, the hidden assets, and the digital footprints he was far too arrogant to conceal properly. Are you deaf? He taunted, crossing his arms over his chest. I said pack your bags. Or do you want me to throw your things out on the front lawn for the entire neighborhood to see? I heard you, I said softly. I did not scream. I did not shed a single tear. I calmly walked over to the closet and began pulling clothes from the hangers. The silence in the bedroom was deafening, broken only by the sharp rustle of fabric as I folded my clothes and placed them into the suitcase. I did not throw things in a panic. I packed with the precision of a woman organizing a complex spreadsheet. Blazers and slacks were stacked in neat rows. I gathered my essential documents from my bedside drawer. My passport, social security card, and encrypted hard drive containing financial backups went into my tote bag. Harrison leaned heavily against the mahogany doorframe, watching me with his arms crossed. I could feel his confusion radiating across the room. He had expected hysterics. He had anticipated a massive breakdown, and my cold, calculated efficiency severely disrupted his script. He needed me to be the victim so he could play the all-powerful conqueror. You are making a huge mistake, he mocked, his voice dripping with arrogance. Walk out that door, and there is no coming back. I am freezing the accounts in the morning. I am canceling the credit cards. You will not see a single dime of my company revenue. You will be eating instant noodles by the end of the week. Your company revenue, I murmured carefully, zipping my toiletry bag. Right, because it is all yours, is it not, Harrison? It is, he snapped, clearly agitated by my absolute lack of fear. Do not even try taking the car. The SUV is registered under my company. You can walk or you can call yourself a cab. I do not care. He was actively trying to strip me of my dignity piece by piece. He wanted to watch me drag my luggage down the driveway. But as an auditor, I was trained to separate emotion from data. And the data in front of me was crystal clear. My husband was a hostile liability, and it was time to liquidate my emotional investment. While he continued to hurl insults, my mind shifted into high-gear processing, the financial breadcrumbs he had carelessly left behind over the past 6 months. The diamond bracelet was an impulsive expense, but Harrison was rarely impulsive without a safety net. His extreme confidence tonight meant he felt financially untouchable. Why? I mentally traced his recent business activities. 3 months ago, he had moved our primary checking accounts to a new bank without consulting me. 2 months ago, he had asked me to sign what he claimed were routine tax extensions for the logistics firm, pushing the paperwork across the kitchen counter while I was cooking dinner. 1 month ago, he had changed the passwords on the corporate operational accounts, claiming it was a mandatory security update. He was not just kicking me out because of an affair with a young subordinate. He was kicking me out tonight because he needed me physically removed from the premises while he finalized a massive financial maneuver. He needed me distracted by heartbreak and panic so I would not look at the books. But you do not pick a financial war with an auditor and expect her to cry, you expect her to audit. He wanted to play dirty, but he lacked the intellectual stamina to cover his tracks against someone who built his entire accounting structure. I knew the exact layout of his supply chain vendor payments. I knew how he categorized personal expenses as business write-offs. I knew the offshore routing he used to avoid higher brackets on his quarterly bonuses. He thought his name on the documents made him a king, completely forgetting that I was the architect of his castle. "You are incredibly quiet," Harrison sneered, stepping further into the room and kicking a stray shoe I had left near the foot of the bed. "What is the matter? Realizing how badly you messed up. You should have just kept your mouth shut about the credit card bill. Sienna knows her place in my life. You never knew yours." I ignored his bait entirely. Engaging with a narcissist only feeds their inflated ego. Instead, I focused my attention on securing my digital assets. My phone was fully charged. My encrypted drive was safely tucked away inside my purse. I had everything I needed to initiate a forensic teardown of his entire life. The realization brought a strange, profound sense of peace. I was no longer a devastated wife trying to save a failing marriage. I was a focused professional executing a hostile takeover. I zipped the suitcase closed. The heavy metallic sound echoed loudly in the silent room. I grabbed my purse, slipped into my thick wool winter coat, and pulled the suitcase handle up with a sharp click. I walked toward the bedroom door where he was standing. I did not stop or slow my pace, forcing him to either step aside or be physically run over by my luggage. He stepped aside at the last possible second, but he followed me closely down the grand staircase, his voice booming loudly in the vaulted foyer. "You are really doing this," he laughed darkly, a sound completely devoid of any warmth or humanity. "You are actually going to walk out into the freezing cold because of your stupid, stubborn pride. Call a cab, Claire. Let us see how long it takes for cold reality to set in. Let us see how long it takes for you to realize that nobody wants a bitter 33-year-old accountant. Sienna is young, beautiful, and she adores me. What do you have?" I reached the front door and rested my hand on the heavy, solid brass handle. I slowly turned to face him. He was smirking, radiating the toxic, negative energy that had silently suffocated me for years. He honestly thought he had won. He thought he was entirely untouchable. "You think you hold all the cards?" I said, my voice incredibly steady, piercing through the chilly air of the hallway. "You think because your name is on the company letterhead that you are invincible. But Harrison, you have always been terrible at math. You only look at the top line, you never bother to check the footnotes." His smirk faltered for a mere fraction of a second. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Before I could even attempt to answer his arrogant question, my smartphone vibrated and emitted a loud, sharp sound that cut through the heavy tension filling the foyer. I glanced down immediately, seeing a name I never expected to see flashing brightly across the digital screen. The caller ID flashed brightly in the dim light of the foyer. DeAndre. DeAndre was Harrison's brother-in-law, married to his older sister, Natalie. At 38 years old, he was a brilliant and sharp-minded black man who worked as a high-level compliance lawyer for one of the largest corporate banking institutions in the city. At family gatherings, DeAndre was always the quiet observer. He sat back and silently tolerated Natalie's obnoxious bragging and Harrison's insufferable arrogance. We rarely spoke on a deep personal level, but we shared a mutual unspoken understanding of how utterly toxic the family dynamic truly was. Receiving a call from him at 2:30 in the morning was not just highly unusual. It was a blaring siren indicating that something massive was unfolding behind the scenes. I swiped the screen to answer, bringing the device to my ear, while never breaking eye contact with my soon-to-be ex-husband. Claire DeAndre's voice was low, urgent, and strictly professional. "Are you somewhere safe?" "I am on my way out the door," I replied evenly, my voice betraying absolutely no emotion. "Good. Do not fight him for the house tonight. Just leave," DeAndre instructed quickly. I cannot talk long, but you need to know this right now. Harrison just submitted his final paperwork for a massive corporate loan expansion through my bank. I caught the file on my desk for an executive compliance review this afternoon. The financial declarations he submitted do not match the reality of his assets. He is hiding something massive, Claire. He is actively shifting capital. I need to meet you tomorrow. You need to see exactly what I found. My blood ran cold, but my analytical mind instantly snapped into high gear. Shifting capital. Fraudulent declarations. My husband was not just cheating on me, he was financially orchestrating my complete ruin. And he was arrogant enough to run his fraudulent paperwork through the very bank where his brother-in-law oversaw corporate compliance. He honestly thought DeAndre was just a passive family member who would rubber stamp his applications without a second glance. He vastly underestimated both of us. A $5 million loan expansion requires immense collateral. If Harrison was faking his asset declarations, he was committing a federal crime. And he was kicking me out right now to ensure I had no access to the home computer or the physical files he kept in his study. Understood, I said into the phone, my voice completely devoid of panic. Name the time and place. I will be there. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. The old diner out on Route 47. Do not let him know I called you. DeAndre hung up immediately. I lowered the phone and slipped it back into my coat pocket. Harrison was staring at me, his eyes narrowed in deep suspicion. The sudden interruption had clearly unsettled him. His rigid posture lost some of its smugness, replaced by a twitchy, nervous energy. "Who was that?" he demanded, taking a heavy step forward. "Who is calling you at this hour? One of your pathetic friends calling to offer you a couch to sleep on." I looked at him. Truly looked at him. I saw past the expensive tailored suit, past the arrogant posture, and past the cruel sneer. I saw a foolish man who had built his empire on a fragile foundation of lies. He was a man who was about to unwittingly hand me the match to burn his entire kingdom to the ground. For years I had managed his accounts, balanced his ledgers, and ensured his business stayed legally compliant. I knew every financial vulnerability he possessed. I gave him a slow, chilling smile. It was not a smile of defeat or heartbreak. It was the smile of an auditor who had just found the ultimate discrepancy in the general ledger. It was the look of someone who realizes they hold the winning hand. "You are right, Harrison," I said softly, my voice echoing in the quiet foyer. "I do not have anything right now. I am walking out of here with just my clothes in this suitcase. But I want you to enjoy this moment. Enjoy the house. Enjoy your new girlfriend, because starting tomorrow you will not have anything either." He scoffed, but I saw a flicker of genuine fear cross his eyes. "You are bluffing. You are a nobody, Claire." I did not waste another breath on him. I turned the heavy brass handle, opened the thick oak door, and walked out into the freezing Chicago night. The biting wind whipped off Lake Michigan, cutting through my wool coat the moment I stepped off the front porch. The pavement was slick with black ice, and the wheels of my suitcase clattered loudly against the frozen concrete, breaking the dead silence of the upscale suburban street. I did not look back. I heard the front door slam shut behind me, the definitive sound of a man violently sealing his own fate. I pulled out my phone and ordered a rideshare, typing in the address of a modest business hotel downtown. The application showed a 20-minute wait. I stood under the flickering amber glow of a street lamp, letting the harsh reality of the situation completely wash over me. My marriage was definitively over. I was essentially homeless in the middle of a winter night, but I did not feel broken or defeated. I felt a massive surge of pure, unfiltered adrenaline coursing through my veins. DeAndre's urgent words echoed loudly in my mind. He is hiding something massive. He is shifting capital. Harrison was not just kicking me out because he was having a predictable midlife crisis fueled by a cliché affair with a subordinate. He was kicking me out tonight because he needed me physically removed from the premises while he finalized a massive financial maneuver. He needed me distracted by heartbreak and panic so I would not look at the company books. But you do not pick a financial war with a senior auditor and expect her to sit in a corner and cry. You expect her to audit every single transaction of your miserable life. The rideshare finally pulled up to the curb, its headlights piercing through the dark street. I loaded my bag into the trunk and slid into the back seat, giving the driver a polite nod. As the car sped down the highway toward the illuminated city skyline, I opened my laptop and connected to my mobile hotspot. I needed to move incredibly fast. Harrison had threatened to freeze our joint accounts in the morning, which meant I had roughly 4 hours before the banks opened, and he could execute his malicious threat. I was about to begin the most important audit of my entire career, and Harrison had absolutely no idea what was coming for him. I settled into the uncomfortable chair at the small desk in my sterile hotel room. The digital clock on the bedside table read 3:45. I had no time to sleep. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I logged into the primary joint savings account Harrison and I shared. The screen loaded, displaying a balance of $145,000. This was money I had largely contributed to over the past 3 years. It was our emergency fund, the capital we had set aside for our future. I did not hesitate. I initiated a wire transfer for exactly $72,500, 50%. Legally, this was marital property. By taking exactly half, I was operating strictly within my legal rights, establishing a clear paper trail that proved I was securing my equitable share before a hostile financial freeze. No judge would ever accuse me of malicious asset depletion. I watched the confirmation screen appear, breathing a sigh of relief. My half of the capital was now safely sitting in a private checking account at an entirely different banking institution. Next, I opened a new tab and navigated to my health insurance portal. Harrison's logistics firm provided our medical coverage. Since I had helped set up his employee benefits package, I knew exactly how quickly an administrator could terminate a dependent. I swiftly downloaded my complete medical history and insurance claims, saving everything to my encrypted hard drive. If Harrison was vicious enough to kick me out at 2 in the morning, he was malicious enough to cancel my health insurance the second his human resources department opened. By 6:30 in the morning, I had backed up every shared financial document I could access. Tax returns, investment portfolios, credit card statements, and utility bills were all safely copied to my drive. I finally closed my laptop and walked into the small hotel bathroom to splash cold water on my face. I needed coffee. I went down to the lobby cafe, grabbed a dark roast, and handed the barista my joint credit card. The machine beeped aggressively. Declined. I handed her a second card linked to our shared checking account. Declined again. I pulled out my private debit card, paid for the coffee, and checked my phone. It was 7:15. Harrison had clearly been busy. The notification screen on my smartphone was lit up with a barrage of alerts. My health insurance application indicated my coverage had been terminated, effective immediately. My banking application showed the remaining joint accounts were locked due to suspicious activity reports. Then a text message from Harrison appeared on the screen. Your accounts are frozen. I reported your debit cards as stolen. I also contacted Human Resources and removed you from the company health plan. Since you no longer work for me, you do not get my benefits. Oh, and your company car has been reported as stolen. The tow truck already picked it up from the hotel parking lot. I tracked the GPS. I told you, Claire, you have nothing. Sign the divorce papers I will send today, and I might write you a check. Refuse, and I will bleed you dry in court. I walked over to the large glass windows of the hotel lobby and looked down at the parking lot. Sure enough, the spot where I had directed the rideshare driver to drop me was completely empty. He had tracked my phone, or had the corporate fleet manager ping the vehicle's location. He had sent a tow truck in the dead of night to leave me stranded. Harrison was actively trying to strip me of my resources, my mobility, and my dignity. He wanted me to feel hunted. He wanted me to feel utterly powerless and isolated in a city that was waking up to a brutal winter storm. He expected me to call him in a full panic, begging for access to my own money, pleading for my car back. I took a slow sip of my hot coffee. I did not feel panic. I felt a profound sense of validation. Every aggressive move he made was highly predictable, entirely documented, and legally problematic for him. He was handing me a golden platter of financial abuse evidence. I picked up my phone and typed a response. I did not plead. I did not show anger. I did not give him the emotional reaction he so desperately craved. Got it. Thanks for the heads up. I hit send. Then I immediately blocked his number. I blocked his personal email. I blocked his corporate email. I blocked every single one of his social media accounts. Let him scream into the digital void. Let him think I was rolling over and accepting defeat. Let him bask in his false sense of absolute victory. I returned to my hotel room and turned on the shower, letting the scalding water wash away the physical exhaustion. When I stepped out, I dried off and opened my suitcase. I bypassed the casual clothes and reached for my sharpest professional black suit. I applied my makeup with ruthless precision, contouring my cheekbones and applying a dark matte lipstick. I pulled my hair back into a sleek, unforgiving bun. I did not look like a heartbroken wife whose marriage had just violently imploded. I looked like an apex predator stepping into the corporate jungle. At 9 o'clock, I grabbed my tote bag containing my laptop and the encrypted hard drive. I left the hotel room, walked out to the busy street, and hailed a yellow taxi. I gave the driver the address for the diner out on Route 47. Harrison had dared me to survive without his money and his prestige. He thought he had severed my lifeline, completely unaware that he had just freed my hands to hold a weapon. I was ready to meet DeAndre and review the fraudulent documents. The war had officially begun. The yellow taxi sped down the interstate, leaving downtown Chicago behind. I sat in the back seat, the heater blasting against the freezing window. I opened my laptop and connected to my secure hotspot. Before meeting DeAndre, I needed to understand what legal framework Harrison was using. He texted me about divorce papers, but narcissists strike first to control narratives. I navigated to the Cook County Court electronic docket. I typed in our last name and hit search. The results loaded instantly. There it was, a brand new domestic relations case filed exactly 48 hours ago. Harrison had initiated divorce proceedings 2 days before our fabricated argument. He orchestrated the midnight fight to manufacture a reason to physically remove me after the filing was already in the system. I paid the digital access fee and downloaded the initial filings. My eyes scanned the legal documents with the detached precision I used when auditing corporate returns. Harrison retained a high-priced, aggressive family law firm. But it was the emergency ex parte motion attached to the petition that made my blood run cold. Harrison had filed a motion requesting exclusive possession of the marital residence and an immediate freeze on all marital assets. To justify an emergency order without my presence, his lawyers had to allege immediate harm. I scrolled down to the sworn affidavit. Harrison signed a document under penalty of perjury, claiming I was actively engaged in the reckless dissipation of marital assets. According to his fabricated narrative, I had developed a severe gambling problem and was secretly funneling thousands of dollars to fund an illicit affair. He claimed my behavior had become erratic, making it unsafe for him to remain in the same house. He even listed the $15,000 transaction at the downtown jeweler as a prime example of my unauthorized spending, twisting his extravagant gift for Sienna into a weapon against me. I read the affidavit twice. He was projecting his own financial infidelity and workplace affair directly onto me. It was a classic narcissistic maneuver. Accuse your victim of the exact crimes you are committing to prejudice the judge. He wanted to establish a documented history of my supposed instability, so my credibility would be destroyed when I inevitably claimed my fair share of the logistics company. He thought this fabricated paper trail would bury me. He thought aggressive attorneys would intimidate an accountant into submission. He was profoundly mathematically wrong. As an auditor, I knew paper trails were double-edged swords. A lie written down under oath is a documented felony. By submitting this affidavit, Harrison legally tethered himself to a specific financial timeline. He claimed I spent $15,000 at the jeweler, but I had the raw credit card data. The transaction was authorized by his corporate digital token, and the delivery address was listed as Sienna's luxury apartment complex, not our home. Furthermore, claiming I was draining accounts was a strategic error. I had 10 years of pristine banking records showing my conservative spending. I had the wire transfer receipt from 3 hours ago, proving I took exactly 50% of the cash reserves, an action well within my legal rights. His emergency motion was built on a house of cards. The moment a forensic accountant reviewed the metadata, his entire legal strategy would collapse into a pile of perjury charges. I saved the court documents to my encrypted drive, filing them in the Project Demolition folder. Every lie he told was another nail in his coffin. He was so desperate to protect his new $5 million bank loan and his girlfriend that he was committing legal suicide. I closed my laptop and looked out the window. The urban architecture had given way to the sparse, open roads of the outer suburbs. Snow flurries began to fall, dusting the dormant fields along Route 47. The taxi slowed down, pulling onto a gravel shoulder next to an old silver diner. The neon sign flickered weakly against the gray winter sky. This was exactly the kind of place DeAndre would choose. It was quiet cash only and completely off the radar of anyone in Harrison's pretentious circle. There were no valet attendants and no chances of running into a loose-lipped corporate acquaintance. It was the perfect location for a clandestine meeting to dismantle a fraudster. I paid the taxi driver in cash, added a generous tip, and grabbed my tote bag. The frigid wind hit my face as I stepped out, but the cold only sharpened my focus. I walked toward the diner entrance, my black heels crunching against the frozen gravel. I pulled the heavy glass door open, stepping into the warm scent of black coffee and fried bacon. The diner was mostly empty. A few truckers sat at the counter, their eyes glued to the muted television screens. I scanned the red vinyl booths lining the back wall. DeAndre was already there. He sat in the furthest corner booth facing the door. He wore a sharp charcoal overcoat over a dark turtleneck, blending perfectly into the shadows while maintaining an alert, commanding presence. A thick manila folder rested on the table in front of him, right next to a steaming mug of black coffee. He looked up as the door chimed, his dark eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that confirmed my suspicions. Whatever he had found in those corporate compliance files was catastrophic. I walked past the counter, ignoring the waitress who offered me a menu, and slid into the booth opposite him. I placed my heavy tote bag on the seat right beside me, keeping my posture impeccably straight. We did not exchange any pleasantries. We did not ask how the other was doing. This was surely not a family reunion. This was now a formal war council. "I am here," I said quietly, so the sound would not travel. "Show me exactly what you have just found today." DeAndre did not waste any time with pleasantries. He pushed the thick manila folder across the scratched table. It stopped inches from my hands. "Harrison submitted this application to my division 72 hours ago." DeAndre said, his voice a low, steady rumble. "He is asking for a $5 million commercial line of credit to supposedly expand his logistics fleet. To secure a loan of that magnitude, the bank requires aggressive collateral." He listed corporate revenue fleet vehicles in a newly acquired real estate portfolio managed by a parent holding company. I opened the folder. The top document was a standard commercial loan application filled out with Harrison's signature. I quickly flipped to the attached schedule of assets. My eyes immediately locked onto the real estate collateral section. There it was printed in stark black ink. Apex Horizon Holdings, LLC. The exact same company I had discovered earlier this morning on the county property appraiser website. The company that currently held the deed to my house. He used our primary residence to back the loan, I stated. Worse. DeAndre leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. He claimed the property was a pure corporate asset entirely unencumbered by marital rights. He signed a sworn affidavit stating he was the sole beneficial owner of the property and that no spousal consent was required for leverage. He committed bank fraud, Claire. But the structure of this holding company is what flagged my system. Harrison is smart enough to know I oversee compliance, but arrogant enough to think I would not personally audit a routine collateral check for a family member. I pulled my laptop from my tote bag and flipped it open. The diner's weak fluorescent lights reflected off the screen. Let us see exactly how he structured this shell company. He thinks he is playing chess, but he just handed us his playbook. I connected to my mobile hotspot and immediately accessed the Secretary of State's corporate registry database. I carefully typed Apex Horizon Holdings, LLC into the primary search bar. A shell company is designed to obscure true ownership, but corporate filings require a registered agent and a managing member. Harrison would never put his own name on a vehicle designed to hide assets from a divorce court. He desperately needed a proxy. He needed someone he could control completely, someone foolish enough to sign federal documents without understanding the liability. The search results loaded quickly. I clicked on the original articles of organization. The corporate document was officially filed exactly 6 months ago, perfectly aligning with the timeline of his affair. I scrolled down to the signature block. I felt a sharp, cynical smile pull at the corners of my mouth. Look at this. I turned the laptop screen toward DeAndre. DeAndre scanned the document, his dark eyes narrowing slightly. Sienna. I confirmed, tapping the screen. 25 years old. Junior logistics coordinator. She makes perhaps $60,000 a year, yet she is listed as the sole managing director and registered agent of a holding company that owns a $1.2 million estate. Harrison did not just buy her a $15,000 diamond bracelet. He bought her a fake corporate empire using my house as the foundation. He is using her as a shield, DeAndre observed smoothly. If the divorce court comes looking for his assets, he claims he does not own the property. If the bank comes looking for collateral, he uses Sienna's signature to authorize the lien. He thinks he has insulated himself. But he made a fatal mathematical error. I countered, my mind assembling the legal trap with ruthless efficiency. By making Sienna the managing director, she assumes total legal liability for the company's actions. When Harrison submitted those forged quitclaim deeds to transfer the house into her LLC, he committed real estate fraud. When Sienna signed the loan application documents as the managing member offering that stolen house as collateral, she committed federal wire fraud and bank fraud. DeAndre leaned back against the red vinyl booth, a slow, appreciative nod, confirming my analysis. Exactly. The loan Harrison applied for is federally insured. Submitting fraudulent financial declarations to a federally backed institution is a felony carrying up to 30 years in prison. Sienna is not just a mistress playing house. She is an active co-conspirator in a federal financial crime. I looked down at the physical bank documents once again, feeling the immense weight of the evidence I now possessed. Harrison had orchestrated my midnight eviction to ensure I could not access his home office and discover these documents before the loan was finalized. He genuinely wanted me out on the street, entirely broke and panicking desperately, trying to find a cheap lawyer to beg for scraps of alimony. He assumed my grief would blind me. He assumed a woman discarded for a younger model would simply crumble under the emotional pressure. Why are you giving this to me, DeAndre? I asked quietly, closing the laptop and looking directly at him. You could have just rejected the loan application internally. You could have flagged it for the bank's fraud department and washed your hands of it entirely. Why go out of your way to bring me the physical file? DeAndre took a slow, deliberate sip of his bitter black coffee. His expression was completely composed, but I could see the cold determination burning in his eyes. Because Natalie and Harrison are exactly the same. They consume people. They treat everyone around them like disposable assets. I have watched Harrison belittle you for 7 years. I have watched him flaunt his arrogance while you built the operational foundation of his entire company. My job is to protect the bank from fraudulent liability, which I absolutely will do. But as a human being, my job is to make sure a parasite like Harrison faces absolute ruin. I am giving you the detonator, Claire. I highly suggest you use it. I looked at the thick manila folder resting on the scratched table between us. I reached out and placed my hand flat against the heavy paper. It contained the exact blueprints of Harrison's impending destruction. I slid the file into my dark leather tote bag, securing it next to my encrypted hard drive. I met DeAndre's intense gaze. We were no longer just in-laws sharing awkward holiday dinners. We were co-conspirators in a highly calculated corporate execution. Why now, I asked, keeping my voice steady against the diner's ambient noise. You have known Harrison as a fraud for years. You have watched him and Natalie operate with the same toxic arrogance since you married into this family. Why choose today to pull the pin? DeAndre took a slow breath, his posture remaining perfectly rigid. He looked out the frosted diner window before turning back to me. Because I am done too, Claire. I am filing for divorce from Natalie next week, and I am pursuing full custody of our children. Natalie is just like her brother. She is consumed by vanity, obsessed with status, and entirely devoid of basic human empathy. She has been draining our personal accounts to fund her ridiculous lifestyle while gaslighting our kids into thinking I am the enemy because I work late to pay for it all. I have spent the last year quietly building an airtight case against her. But Natalie is heavily funded by Harrison's company dividends. If Harrison's logistics firm remains solvent, Natalie will use that endless stream of capital to drag me through family court for a decade. She will try to destroy my relationship with my children using her brother's dirty money. I absorbed his words, admiring the sheer strategic brilliance of his plan. DeAndre did not just want to leave his wife. He needed to cripple her primary funding source. Harrison's logistics firm was the financial engine that powered the entire family's arrogant lifestyle. By handing me the evidence of Harrison's bank fraud, DeAndre was effectively cutting off the head of the snake. We were executing a synchronized strike. You want me to neutralize Harrison so Natalie cannot use his wealth against you in family court? I stated, appreciating the cold logic. It is a mutually beneficial transaction. Exactly? DeAndre confirmed, a faint smile touching his lips. I am a black man working in corporate compliance. I had to be flawless to reach my position at the bank. I do not take shortcuts, and I do not break the law. Harrison, on the other hand, thinks the rules do not apply to him because he was born with a silver spoon and an inflated ego. I cannot officially report him from inside the bank without triggering a massive internal audit that would blow my cover and potentially jeopardize my own exit strategy. But you can. You are the aggrieved spouse. You are a senior financial auditor. You have the access, the expertise, and the perfect motive. DeAndre reached into his overcoat and pulled out a smaller sealed envelope. He placed it carefully on the table. Inside that envelope are the specific routing numbers, internal compliance codes, and the exact names of the federal investigators you need to contact at the IRS and the SEC. DeAndre explained smoothly. You do not just file a standard police report, Claire. You file a formal federal whistleblower complaint. Are you familiar with the IRS whistleblower office? I am. I replied, my mind already calculating the percentages. If the IRS recovers funds from a tax evader or fraudster based on actionable intelligence provided by a whistleblower, the informant is entitled to between 15 and 30% of the total recovered proceeds. Harrison has been heavily underreporting his corporate income and hiding assets in that shell company to avoid capital gains taxes. DeAndre continued, when the feds tear his logistics company apart, they will seize millions. You will not just walk away with your half of the marital assets. The federal government will literally pay you a massive bounty for handing them a criminal. You will walk away a multimillionaire, and Harrison will walk away in handcuffs. The sheer scale of the retaliation was beautiful. Harrison had tried to leave me with absolutely nothing. He had literally thrown my suitcase onto the floor and mocked my salary. He had no idea he was actively forcing me into a position where I would legally inherit a massive percentage of his entire dismantled empire. What about Sienna? I asked, bringing the conversation back to the 25-year-old accomplice. Sienna is the weak link, DeAndre said dismissively. She is young, naive, and blinded by Harrison's flashy lifestyle. When the federal agents show up at her luxury apartment and inform her she is facing 30 years in federal prison for signing fraudulent loan applications and real estate deeds, she will panic. She will not protect him. She will turn state's evidence faster than Harrison can call his expensive defense attorneys. She will hand them every email, every text message, and every illegal directive he ever gave her. She is our star witness, and she does not even know it yet. I nodded, mapping out the precise timeline in my head. I need time to compile the audit. I need to cross-reference the banking documents you just gave me with the tax returns I backed up this morning. I also need to formally draft the whistleblower submissions so they are legally bulletproof. You have exactly 4 weeks, DeAndre stated, finishing the last sip of his coffee. Harrison is hosting a massive corporate gala at the end of next month. He is renting out the grand ballroom at the downtown plaza. He intends to use the event to publicly celebrate the approval of his new $5 million credit line, and according to Natalie, he is planning to officially introduce Sienna to his high society circle as his new partner. It is supposed to be his ultimate victory lap. A victory lap. I repeated, a dangerous thrill igniting in my chest. He wants an audience. He wants everyone to see how successful and untouchable he is, DeAndre confirmed. The bank executives will be there. The logistics partners will be there. The entire family will be there, ready to toast his success and mock your absence. I will ensure the bank's internal approval remains pending just long enough to keep him comfortable. You prepare the federal strike. We did not need to discuss anything further. The strategy was flawless. I reached into my purse, pulled out a $20 bill, and dropped it on the table to cover his coffee. DeAndre stood up, adjusting his charcoal overcoat. He extended his hand. I stood and shook it firmly. It was the handshake of two professionals sealing a corporate pact. We were going to dismantle a toxic family using nothing but their own arrogance and a trail of undeniable paperwork. Good luck, Claire, DeAndre said, turning toward the diner exit. I will see you at the gala. I watched him walk out into the freezing wind, his figure disappearing into the gray morning light. I picked up my heavy tote bag, feeling the weight of the evidence inside. I stepped out of the diner and hailed another taxi, directing the driver back to the city. I had a massive amount of work to do, and I was going to enjoy every single second of it. The ride back to downtown Chicago felt significantly faster than the trip out. I sat in the back of the yellow taxi, my hand resting firmly on the thick leather of my tote bag. Just before we had parted ways outside the diner, DeAndre had handed over one final piece of ammunition. He had slipped a small silver flash drive silently into my palm, his eyes conveying the absolute gravity of the device. It was not just a collection of printed documents. It was the raw, unfiltered data export from his bank's compliance division. I arrived back at the sterile business hotel just before noon. The storm clouds outside had darkened, casting a heavy gray shadow over the city skyline, but inside my room the atmosphere was electric. I locked the deadbolt, hung up my wool coat, and immediately set up my workspace on the small laminate desk. I placed my own encrypted hard drive on the left and DeAndre's silver flash drive on the right. I opened my laptop, entered my security credentials, and inserted the silver drive. A password prompt appeared on the screen. I typed in the sequence DeAndre had written on the back of his compliance note. The drive unlocked and a massive directory of banking files materialized before my eyes. I clicked on the master folder labeled with Harrison's corporate tax identification number. As a senior financial auditor, I have reviewed hundreds of corporate ledgers, dissecting complex tax evasion schemes and identifying subtle accounting errors. But what I was looking at right now was not subtle. It was a masterpiece of extreme arrogance. Harrison had officially submitted a commercial application for a $5 million revolving line of credit. To secure a loan of that staggering magnitude, the bank required aggressive capital verification. Harrison needed to prove his logistics company possessed enough liquid assets and unencumbered property to cover a $5 million default. My eyes scanned the meticulously organized files, quickly locating the collateral schedule. Harrison had inflated his corporate revenue by 30%, utilizing fake invoices generated from offshore vendor accounts. He was claiming future projected revenue as current liquid cash, a blatant violation of federal banking standards. But the true fatal flaw lay in the real estate documentation. I opened the property valuation file. Harrison had listed our primary suburban residence as the crown jewel of his collateral portfolio. The paperwork showed the house was appraised at $1.2 million. However, under the ownership section, he did not list his own name. He listed Apex Horizon Holdings, LLC, the shell company he had secretly created 6 months ago. I pulled up the specific loan guarantee documents. To use corporate-owned real estate as collateral, the managing director of that corporation must sign a federal declaration under penalty of perjury. They must swear that the property is completely free of external liens, marital claims, or pending litigation. I zoomed in on the signature block at the bottom of the PDF. The digital signature was stamped clearly in blue ink. Sienna. Harrison had essentially convinced his 25-year-old mistress to sign her name on a federally insured loan application, pledging a stolen house she did not actually own. Sienna had absolutely no idea what she was signing. She likely thought it was just a formality, a simple document to help her successful older boyfriend expand his business. She was completely unaware that signing a fraudulent collateral guarantee for a $5 million bank loan constituted federal wire fraud. Harrison was using her as a human shield. If the bank ever discovered the house was stolen from his wife during a pending divorce, Harrison could claim ignorance. He could blame the LLC. He could blame Sienna, pointing to her signature as proof that she acted independently as the managing director. He was setting her up to take the fall for a massive financial crime while he walked away clean with the $5 million payout. The sheer sociopathic nature of his strategy was breathtaking. He was destroying my life to secure the asset, and he was grooming his new girlfriend to take the legal bullet if the scheme imploded. I opened my own hard drive and pulled up the genuine tax returns and mortgage documents I had backed up earlier that morning. I created a split screen on my monitor. On the left side, I displayed the authentic financial reality of our marriage. On the right side, I displayed the fabricated financial fantasy Harrison had submitted to the bank. I began building the master audit file. I cross-referenced every fake invoice on his application with the actual vendor payments in our shared business accounts. I highlighted the exact dates he forged my signature on the property transfer deeds. I mapped the entire timeline, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that his affair with Sienna perfectly coincided with the incorporation of the shell company. This was no longer just a divorce case. It was a federal racketeering investigation waiting to happen. The $5 million loan was currently marked as pending internal compliance review. DeAndre was purposely stalling the final approval signature. He was keeping the file suspended in digital purgatory, giving me the exact window of time I needed to prepare the whistleblower submission. Harrison believed the money was guaranteed. He was so confident in his untouchable status that he had already booked a grand ballroom for a massive corporate gala to celebrate the capital expansion. He wanted an audience. He wanted to parade his new girlfriend around high society while securing his reputation as a self-made millionaire. He wanted to toast to his brilliant future while I was supposedly crying in a cheap motel. I saved the comprehensive audit report and exported the files into highly secured folders. My fingers typed rapidly, drafting the preliminary executive summary for the Internal Revenue Service and the Securities and Exchange Commission. A $5 million bank fraud scheme involving a registered shell company would trigger an immediate federal asset freeze the moment the investigators verified the data. I glanced at the digital clock on my laptop screen. It was late afternoon. My phone had remained completely silent since I blocked Harrison and his family. They assumed they had silenced me. They assumed my lack of response meant I had surrendered. They had absolutely no idea that I was currently compiling a digital arsenal that would annihilate their entire privileged existence. I closed the final spreadsheet and leaned back in the rigid hotel chair. The evidence was irrefutable. The trap was fully constructed. Harrison had engineered a $5 million financial bomb, and thanks to DeAndre, the detonator was now resting firmly in my hands. The only thing left to do was wait for the perfect moment to press the button. I closed the laptop screen and allowed myself exactly 5 minutes to breathe. The adrenaline that had fueled my overnight audit was beginning to recede, replaced by a sharp, calculating calm. I had isolated myself in this downtown hotel room to build an impenetrable legal fortress. Harrison and his family, however, were entirely incapable of operating in silence. Narcissists cannot simply win a private war. They require a public spectacle to validate their manufactured reality. They need an audience to applaud their cruelty and validate their distorted version of events. I opened my secondary phone, a device I kept strictly for monitoring corporate social media trends. While I had blocked Harrison and his immediate circle on my personal accounts, I knew they would not stay quiet. I navigated to Instagram and typed in the handle for Natalie. Natalie was Harrison's older sister and DeAndre's soon-to-be ex-wife. She was a woman who treated her social media presence like a reality television show, constantly broadcasting her extravagant lifestyle funded entirely by her brother's corporate dividends. She was deeply insecure, aggressively vain, and fiercely protective of the toxic family dynamic that elevated her social status. She thrived on tearing other women down to make herself feel superior. Her profile immediately loaded and the latest post glared back at me. It was a highly edited, dramatically lit photograph of Harrison looking mournful and exhausted sitting on the plush sofa in our living room. The caption beneath the image was a masterclass in psychological manipulation and character assassination. Natalie had written a sprawling, vicious essay dedicated to utterly destroying my reputation. She framed the entire narrative around her poor, victimized brother, who had just suffered the ultimate betrayal. According to her post, I was a manipulative gold digger who had finally been exposed. She claimed I had been secretly draining Harrison's hard-earned money to fund a lavish secret lifestyle and an illicit affair. She painted a vivid picture of a deranged, unstable woman who had completely lost her mind when confronted, forcing Harrison to change the locks for his own physical safety. The sheer audacity of the lies was staggering. Natalie did not just stop at vague accusations. She specifically tagged my corporate auditing firm, local professional networking groups, and dozens of mutual friends in the post. She wanted to ensure my professional reputation was scorched beyond repair. She wanted to make sure I was essentially unhireable in the city of Chicago. I scrolled down to read the comment section beneath the photograph. It was a feeding frenzy of toxic enablers. Extended family members whom I had hosted for Thanksgiving dinners and purchased expensive birthday gifts for over the last 7 years were eagerly piling on. They called me a parasite. They called me unhinged. They praised Harrison for finally taking out the trash and taking his life back. Natalie was actively replying to every single comment, amplifying the drama, and assuring everyone that the family was standing strong against my supposed psychotic breakdown. I took a screenshot of the post. Then I scrolled through the comments, capturing every single interaction. I saved the files directly to a new folder on my encrypted drive. I made sure every image was backed up to a secure cloud server. In a standard divorce, a post like this would cause immense emotional distress. A normal person would feel humiliated, driven to defend themselves publicly, or perhaps even shamed into hiding. I felt none of those things. I viewed Natalie's digital outburst through the clinical lens of a federal investigator. She was actively establishing a public time-stamped record of coordinated harassment and defamation. She was openly proving that the entire family was conspiring to execute a malicious smear campaign designed to coerce me into abandoning my marital assets. I navigated to Facebook, where the older, more entrenched social circles gathered. Natalie had cross-posted the exact same essay there, but with an added layer of viciousness. She also included a photograph of my company car being towed away from the hotel parking lot. The caption mocked me, stating that absolute justice was served and that I was finally walking the freezing streets where I truly belonged. Harrison must have sent her that photograph immediately after the tow truck arrived. They were coordinating their attacks in real time, sharing evidence of my displacement like trophies from a successful hunt. They were so utterly blinded by their own arrogance that they failed to realize they were handing me documented proof of illegal asset seizure. Taking a vehicle that I had legal access to, especially one utilized for marital transportation, and publicizing the repossession to cause intentional emotional distress is a massive liability in civil court. I documented the Facebook post just as meticulously as the Instagram feed. Every screenshot was properly time-stamped and meticulously archived. Natalie thought she was burying me under a mountain of public shame. She had absolutely no idea that she was constructing a flawless defamation lawsuit that I would eventually unleash to drain whatever capital she had left after DeAndre officially divorced her. Her vanity was creating a perfect weapon for her own demise. My secondary phone buzzed suddenly in my hand. A new direct message request popped up on Instagram. The bright notification displayed a profile picture of a young woman with perfectly styled hair and an oversized designer handbag. It was Sienna. Harrison was using his sister to manage the public execution, but he was deploying his 25-year-old mistress to handle the psychological warfare on the front lines. They desperately wanted a reaction. They needed me to lash out to send an angry message or to beg for mercy. They needed me to participate in their childish drama to validate their narrative of the crazy, hysterical ex-wife. I tapped the screen accepting the message request without sending a read receipt. The text loaded and the sheer childish cruelty of the message perfectly highlighted the intellect of the woman Harrison had chosen to replace me. I stared at the bright screen, absorbing the incoming attack, and prepared to document the next phase of their coordinated implosion. The toxic family was currently working overtime to actively build my entire case for me, and I was more than happy to just sit back, watch the flames rise, and let them keep digging their own deep graves. The first image loaded on my screen. It was a high-resolution photograph of Sienna standing in front of the dual vanity in my master bathroom. She was wearing my expensive silk bathrobe, the one I had purchased during a corporate trip to Milan. Her hair was wrapped in a towel, and she was holding a glass of my vintage champagne. The text beneath the image read, "Thanks for leaving the good bath bombs. You can keep the cheap hotel soap." A second image quickly followed. This one showed Sienna lounging on the custom velvet sectional in the living room, her bare feet resting on the mahogany coffee table. The caption was equally juvenile. "Harrison says you always hated this couch. Good thing I love it. Do not worry about coming back for your leftover junk. The cleaning crew is throwing it in the dumpster tomorrow. He says you can use your new free time to finally update your boring wardrobe." She was trying to provoke a visceral reaction. She wanted me to scream, to hurl insults, to act like a discarded, jealous wife. But when I looked at the photographs, I did not see another woman wearing my clothes. I saw a primary suspect actively placing herself at the scene of a federal financial crime. I zoomed in on the second photograph of the living room. Sienna had positioned herself to show off the expensive artwork on the walls, but she failed to notice the details resting on the kitchen island in the background. There was a stack of mail sitting next to a set of keys. I maximized the image. The top envelope was clearly visible. It was a piece of official correspondence addressed to Apex Horizon Holdings, LLC, care of Sienna, delivered directly to my residential address. This was not just a taunting text message. It was documented proof of residency and corporate operation. Sienna was actively receiving mail for the fraudulent shell company at the exact property she had illegally pledged as collateral for a $5 million commercial loan. She was documenting her own complicity in real time. I took screenshots capturing the timestamps and saved them into the Project Demolition folder. Every petty insult she sent was another piece of evidence linking her directly to Harrison's bank fraud. Meanwhile, the public backlash from Natalie's original social media post was intensifying by the minute. The notification counter climbed relentlessly as people rushed to participate. Employees from Harrison's logistics firm began flooding the comment section, desperate to earn points with their wealthy boss. A regional fleet manager wrote that I always seemed cold and elitist at corporate retreats, claiming it was obvious I was only there for the money. A vendor we used for supply chain routing commented that Harrison deserved a real woman who supported his grand vision, not an uptight accountant who held him back. They were building a massive echo chamber of validation for a man who was actively defrauding a federally insured bank. I watched these people eagerly attach their real names and professional profiles to a rapidly sinking ship. They thought they were aligning themselves with power and prestige. They had no idea they were endorsing a criminal whose assets would soon be seized. Natalie posted a follow-up comment tagging a prominent local real estate agent. She announced that Harrison was completely revamping the house to erase all memories of my toxic presence, and that the family was planning a massive celebration to welcome his new chapter. She was broadcasting his financial movements to the entire city. The level of sheer arrogance required to publicly brag about a stolen house while simultaneously submitting fraudulent loan applications was astounding. I remained absolutely silent. In any crisis management scenario, silence is the ultimate weapon against an opponent who relies entirely on emotional chaos. Harrison wanted a reaction to justify his aggressive narrative. Sienna wanted me to break down so she could feel victorious in her stolen bathrobe. Natalie wanted a public screaming match to entertain her shallow followers and distract from her own impending divorce from DeAndre. By giving them nothing, I starved their fire of oxygen. Narcissists simply cannot handle a void. When they do not get the desperate reaction they demand, they escalate their behavior until they make a fatal mistake. They need to poke the bear until it roars. My silence was deafening to them, and it was driving them to act with increasing recklessness. I sat calmly in my hotel room organizing the digital files, ensuring every piece of evidence was meticulously labeled and cross-referenced for the federal investigators. I reviewed the timeline DeAndre had provided. The Bank Compliance Division was currently holding the $5 million loan in a pending status. Harrison would be expecting the final approval any day now. His entire public facade depended on that influx of capital to fund his expanding lifestyle and keep Natalie's extravagant spending afloat. The pressure on him to secure that money was mounting even as he pretended to be an untouchable king on social media. I closed the social media applications and focused on the official Internal Revenue Service whistleblower forms. The forms required precise details regarding the methods of tax evasion, the exact corporate entities involved, and the identities of the managing directors. Thanks to Sienna's eager text messages and Natalie's public bragging, I had everything I needed to complete the submission with devastating accuracy. As I finalized the last page of the federal document, my phone screen shifted. The barrage of social media notifications suddenly stopped, replaced by a direct incoming text message. It was not from Sienna this time. It was from Harrison. The waiting game was officially over. My silence had finally broken his patience, and he was moving in to deliver what he thought would be the final crushing blow. I picked up the phone completely prepared for his next maneuver. The message was a dense block of text accompanied by a secure link to a digital document portal. Harrison was bypassing his expensive legal team to negotiate directly with me. This was a massive violation of standard divorce protocol and a glaring indicator of his underlying anxiety. He was trying to project absolute power, but his impulsive actions revealed deep structural panic. I opened the message and read his demands with the detached amusement of a teacher grading a failing exam. Claire, I am trying to be generous here despite your erratic and frankly embarrassing behavior over the past few days. I have instructed my lawyers to draw up a clean break settlement. Sign the attached waiver relinquishing your claims to the logistics firm and the marital residence. In exchange for your immediate cooperation, I will authorize a wire transfer of $10,000 to your private account. You can use it to find a cheap apartment and move on with your miserable life. If you decide to fight me, my legal team will bury you in endless litigation until you are completely bankrupt. You have 24 hours to sign and return the document. Do not test me. $10,000. It was an absolutely insulting fraction of the logistics company's actual worth, let alone the $1.2 million house he had stolen. He was offering me loose change while aggressively applying for a $5 million commercial loan. I clicked the secure link to examine the actual legal document he wanted me to sign. It was formatted as a standard marital settlement agreement, but a quick review of the clauses revealed his true motive. The document contained a massive ironclad non-disclosure agreement. Harrison did not just want a quick divorce. He wanted me legally and permanently gagged. The non-disclosure agreement explicitly forbade me from discussing the company's financial operations, tax filings, asset transfers, or internal banking structures with any third-party government agency or financial institution. The penalty for violating the agreement was a ruinous civil lawsuit designed to strip me of any future earnings. I sat back in my chair and let out a short, sharp laugh. He was terrified. The restrictive non-disclosure agreement had absolutely nothing to do with our marriage or his new 25-year-old girlfriend. It was entirely about his loan fraud. He knew I possessed the historical ledgers. He needed me contractually silenced before the bank's compliance division finalized his $5 million credit line. If I signed this document and then reported him to federal authorities, his lawyers could theoretically sue me for breach of contract, creating a tangled legal mess that might slow down a federal investigation. I needed to keep him on the hook. If I rejected the offer outright, he might panic, realize I was preparing a counterattack, and attempt to withdraw the fraudulent loan application before DeAndre could process the evidence. If I simply ignored the message, he might escalate his public attacks and disrupt my carefully orchestrated timeline. I needed to placate him just enough to maintain his false sense of untouchable security. I typed a brief, ambiguous response. I received the document. I need time to review the non-disclosure clauses before making a decision. I hit send. Less than a minute later, my phone vibrated with his rapid reply. Do not play games with me, Claire. You have until tomorrow at noon. Take the money and walk away quietly. Nobody is going to save you. He honestly thought my hesitation meant I was seriously considering his pathetic offer. He thought the threat of aggressive litigation was successfully breaking my spirit. He believed he had successfully cornered me. I set the phone aside, feeling a profound sense of satisfaction. The settlement offer was the absolute final piece of evidence I needed for my federal whistleblower package. It provided documented proof that Harrison was actively attempting to conceal his financial crimes by coercing his former accountant and spouse into a punitive gag order. I saved the settlement document as a PDF and moved it directly into the project demolition folder on my encrypted hard drive. As an auditor, I knew federal agencies responded best to overwhelming, neatly categorized data. They do not want emotional narratives. They want highlighted spreadsheets, clear timelines, and undeniable paper trails. I gathered my laptop and headed down to the hotel's business center to utilize their secure printing services. For the next 2 hours, I stood in the quiet, windowless room, printing and assembling the physical binders. I printed the forged quitclaim deeds, transferring our home to the shell company. I printed the fake offshore vendor invoices he used to inflate his corporate revenue. I printed the articles of organization showing Sienna's signature as the managing director of the fraudulent holding company. Finally, I printed Harrison's blackmail settlement offer, highlighting the restrictive non-disclosure clauses in bright yellow ink. I organized everything into heavy black binders, separating the financial discrepancies with crisp white tabs. The physical weight of the binders was deeply satisfying. While Harrison was out in the city dining at expensive restaurants, showing off his mistress, and bleeding cash to maintain his illusions, I was standing in a sterile hotel basement dismantling his entire foundation line by line. He thought a $10,000 bribe would make me disappear. He thought he could buy my silence and my compliance with the equivalent of a minor business expense. He had spent 7 years underestimating my intelligence, and that blind arrogance was about to cost him his freedom. The $10,000 settlement offer was not a legal victory for him, it was a written confession. He had handed me the final nail for his coffin, and I was fully prepared to drive it home. I packed the black binders into my tote bag and headed back to my room to prepare the official federal submission. I returned to the sterile hotel room and locked the heavy door behind me, the physical weight of the black binders grounding my focus. I placed them directly next to my laptop. The time for gathering evidence was officially over. The time for federal execution had arrived. I opened my browser and navigated straight to the Internal Revenue Service Whistleblower Office portal. Filing an IRS Form 211 is not a simple online complaint. It is a highly structured legal declaration requiring precise calculations of tax liabilities, estimated penalties, and explicit details of the evasion methodology. I began filling out the digital fields with clinical accuracy. For the target entity, I entered Harrison's logistics firm. For the secondary corporate entity, I entered Apex Horizon Holdings, LLC. I detailed the offshore vendor routing he utilized to artificially deflate his taxable income while simultaneously inflating his loan collateral. I uploaded the cross-referenced spreadsheets clearly demonstrating the massive delta between his actual operating revenue and his fraudulent tax declarations. Every single number was double-checked. Every claim was supported by authentic bank statements and matching digital timestamps. I attached the forged quitclaim deed, highlighting the unauthorized transfer of a $1.2 million marital asset to a corporate entity explicitly designed to evade capital gains and hide assets from a divorce proceeding. I systematically laid out his entire financial architecture so the federal agents would not have to guess. I handed them a fully solved puzzle. Next, I moved to the federal banking regulators and the Internet Crime Complaint Center. While Harrison's company was privately held, his aggressive attempt to secure a $5 million commercial line of credit crossed directly into federal banking territory. I filled out the official fraud declaration specifically outlining the mechanics of the wire fraud. I detailed exactly how Sienna, acting as the managing director of the shell company, utilized interstate digital communications to submit falsified collateral documents to a federally insured banking institution. I attached her taunting social media posts. The photographs showing her actively receiving corporate mail at my home address proved she was not an unwitting victim. She was an active managing participant in the corporate structure. She had signed documents under penalty of perjury. I reviewed both federal submissions one last time. The narrative I crafted was entirely stripped of all emotion. There were no bitter mentions of a ruined marriage, a younger mistress, or a humiliating midnight eviction. Federal agents do not care about broken hearts. They care about broken laws. I provided them with a fully packaged, ready-to-prosecute financial crime. I took a deep breath, hovering my cursor over the final submission buttons. I clicked Submit on the IRS portal. A confirmation tracking number appeared on the screen. I clicked Submit on the fraud portal. A second confirmation number materialized. The digital missiles were officially launched. The federal government was now actively reviewing Harrison's entire existence. I picked up my secondary phone and drafted a secure encrypted message to DeAndre. The package is delivered. Both channels are active. Maintain the holding pattern. Less than a minute later, DeAndre replied. The file remains pending on my desk. He is calling my office twice a day asking for the approval signature. I told his broker we are waiting on a standard collateral verification process. The tension on his end is building. Over the next 3 weeks, I maintained absolute radio silence. I did not respond to Harrison's escalating threats regarding the $10,000 settlement offer. When the 24-hour deadline passed, he sent a furious email promising to bankrupt me in court. I ignored it. I ignored Natalie's continuous social media provocations. I rented a quiet, beautifully furnished apartment in a different district of the city, using the funds I had legally secured from our joint savings account. I set up a highly secure home office and took on a few short-term corporate consulting contracts to keep my skills sharp and my mind fully occupied. I watched Harrison's digital footprint from afar with immense satisfaction. His logistics firm's social media accounts began heavily promoting an upcoming corporate gala. It was publicly billed as a massive industry event to celebrate their unprecedented quarterly growth and expanding market dominance. In reality, it was Harrison's desperate attempt to project extreme liquidity while waiting for a $5 million loan that would never actually materialize. He was bleeding capital to host an extravagant party, renting out the grand ballroom at the downtown plaza and hiring premium catering services. He needed to look rich to convince his investors and his peers that he was completely untouchable. Narcissists require a grand stage. They need an audience to validate their illusions. Harrison was going to use this gala to formally introduce Sienna to high society as his new partner and to toast to his brilliant corporate expansion. He was going to stand in front of hundreds of successful people and declare himself a king. He believed I was completely neutralized, hiding in a cheap motel, and too ashamed to ever show my face in his circle again. He assumed his victory was absolute. I knew exactly what I had to do. DeAndre had secured an entry pass for me. He managed to add a +1 to his own corporate RSVP, listing my attendance under an independent consulting alias that Harrison would never recognize on a guest list. The stage was perfectly set for a catastrophic collision. I walked to the spacious closet of my new apartment and pulled out a stunning structured emerald green dress I had purchased specifically for this occasion. The tailoring was flawless, projecting sharp, undeniable authority. It was definitely not a dress for a grieving ex-wife. It was a uniform for a corporate executioner. I paired it with my most aggressive heels and a simple, elegant necklace. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, feeling the quiet thrum of adrenaline pulsing through my veins. The federal investigators were already moving behind the scenes, tracking the shell companies and securing the wire fraud evidence. Harrison's financial empire was a hollow shell resting on a live explosive, and tomorrow night, I was going to walk right into his grand ballroom and hand him the detonator in front of everyone he wanted to impress. The next evening arrived with a biting chill that swept across downtown Chicago. I stepped out of the black town car and looked up at the towering glass facade of the plaza. The grand ballroom on the top floor glowed with a warm golden light, a beacon of manufactured success projecting into the freezing night sky. I walked through the revolving doors, my emerald green dress moving fluidly with each confident step. I handed my heavy winter coat to the attendant and secured my clutch, which contained the single physical document I needed for the night. I bypassed the main reception line utilizing the secondary entrance DeAndre had provided. I stepped into the periphery of the massive ballroom and immediately assessed the financial reality of the room. Harrison was bleeding capital at an astonishing rate. The space was decorated with towering cascades of white orchids and imported hydrangeas. Two massive ice sculptures flanked a premium seafood bar serving beluga caviar. Waiters in crisp white jackets circulated constantly with silver trays carrying glasses of vintage champagne. I quickly calculated the overhead. He had easily dropped $80,000 on this single evening, burning through his operating cash reserves to impress an audience of bankers and industry competitors. I remained standing in the shadows near a marble pillar, letting the crowded room act as my camouflage. I scanned the floor and quickly spotted DeAndre. He was standing near the private bar, nursing a glass of sparkling water. He wore a perfectly tailored navy suit, projecting total professional calm. Our eyes met briefly across the room. He gave me a barely perceptible nod, signaling that the senior bank executives were present, and the trap remained undisturbed. A few feet away from DeAndre stood his soon-to-be ex-wife, Natalie. She was wearing a garish silver sequined gown that caught the light aggressively with every movement. She held a glass of wine and was talking loudly to a group of logistics vendors, undoubtedly bragging about her brother's incredible success and her own elevated status within the family hierarchy. She looked absolutely thrilled, reveling in the toxic triumph of my presumed defeat. Then my eyes found the center of the room. Harrison stood basking in the glow of a massive crystal chandelier. He wore a custom-tailored black tuxedo, holding a crystal tumbler of expensive scotch in one hand. Tucked intimately against his side was Sienna. She wore a tight crimson dress that left very little to the imagination. And there, sparkling brilliantly on her right wrist, was the $15,000 diamond tennis bracelet, the exact piece of jewelry that had initiated this entire sequence of events just 4 weeks ago. Sienna clung to his arm, laughing loudly at jokes made by regional fleet managers and aggressively playing the role of the successful executive partner. Harrison was radiating pure, narcissistic triumph. He believed he had successfully shed his dead weight. He believed his $5 million commercial loan was a mere formality waiting for a signature on Monday morning. He was actively introducing his young mistress to bank vice presidents and corporate leaders as his key logistics coordinator and personal partner. The sheer audacity required to mix his federal fraud accomplice with banking executives was truly a sight to behold. He felt entirely untouchable. A string quartet played soft classical music from a raised stage in the corner. I watched quietly as Harrison motioned to the catering staff. A waiter immediately brought him a microphone. The ambient noise in the room gradually quieted down as the string quartet faded their music into silence. Harrison tapped the microphone twice, stepping up onto a small, elevated platform at the front of the grand ballroom. Sienna stood proudly at the base of the short stairs, looking up at him with manufactured adoration. Natalie cheered loudly from the front row, holding her wine glass high in the air. "Thank you all for coming," Harrison began, his voice echoing deeply through the massive room. "Tonight is a celebration of grand vision. It is a celebration of aggressive corporate growth and the relentless pursuit of excellence." He paused for dramatic effect, soaking in the rapt attention of the wealthy guests. "As many of you know, my logistics firm is entering an unprecedented phase of expansion. We are in the final stages of securing a $5 million capital injection that will double our fleet, upgrade our supply chain technology, and secure our total dominance in the Midwest sector." Polite applause rippled through the well-dressed crowd. I saw two senior bank executives standing near the bar, politely clapping along with the rest. They had absolutely no idea the loan they were currently applauding was built entirely on forged property deeds and offshore tax evasion. "But a man does not build an empire alone," Harrison continued, lowering his voice to sound intimate and profound. "You need people around you who share your unyielding energy, your passion, and your drive. You need people who do not hold you back with small-minded thinking or outdated limitations. You have to surround yourself with absolute, unshakable loyalty." He looked directly down at Sienna. "I want to publicly thank my incredible partner, Sienna. She has brought a fresh, dynamic perspective to the firm over the past 8 months. She is the managing director of our newest real estate holding venture, Apex Horizon Holdings, and she represents the bright, innovative future of this company." Sienna blushed deeply and waved gracefully as the crowd clapped again. I felt a cold, sharp smile spread across my face. He had just publicly linked her to the fraudulent shell company in a room full of corporate witnesses and banking officials. He had just handed the federal investigators a recorded public confession of their corporate partnership. It was a spectacular, self-inflicted legal wound. Harrison raised his glass of scotch high above his head. "To the future," he declared proudly. "To the future," the crowd echoed, raising their champagne glasses in unison. The applause swelled, and Harrison stepped down from the platform, pulling Sienna into a tight embrace, the perfect picture of arrogant victory. I adjusted my posture, smoothing the fabric of my emerald green dress. The speeches were officially over. The illusion had reached its absolute peak. It was finally time for the auditor to step out of the shadows and present the bill. I gripped my clutch, locked my eyes onto Harrison's smiling face, and began a slow, deliberate walk directly into the center of his grand celebration. The click of my heels against the polished marble floor cut through the lingering applause like a metronome. I did not rush. I walked with the slow, measured pace of a woman who owned the room. The guests standing near the periphery were the first to notice me. Conversations abruptly halted. Wine glasses froze halfway to their mouths. Whispers ignited and spread through the crowd like a brush fire. People recognized me. I had attended these corporate galas for 7 years as the dutiful, supportive wife. They expected the woman who used to stand quietly in the background wearing muted colors. They did not expect this version of Claire. They did not expect the vivid emerald green dress, the aggressive posture, or the absolute absence of shame. As I moved deeper into the grand ballroom, the sea of black tuxedos and pastel designer gowns parted to clear a path for me. The sheer force of my presence demanded an aisle, and the high society guests instinctively provided one. I kept my eyes locked on the elevated platform where Harrison was celebrating his public declaration of corporate supremacy. He was turned away from me, whispering something into Sienna's ear and making her giggle loudly. Before I could reach the center of the room, a flash of garish silver sequins blocked my path. Natalie planted herself directly in front of me. Her face was flushed with wine and self-righteous fury. She had clearly spotted me from the front row and decided this was her perfect opportunity to defend her brother's honor and humiliate me in front of Chicago's corporate elite. "What do you think you are doing?" Natalie hissed loudly. Her voice was sharp and intentionally elevated so the surrounding guests could hear every single word. "You have a lot of nerve showing your face here, Claire. This is a private event. You are not on the guest list." I stopped walking. I stood perfectly still and let my gaze travel slowly from her heavily styled hair down to her designer shoes, assessing her with the cold calculation of an auditor reviewing a fraudulent expense report. "I do not need an invitation to attend an event funded by my own marital assets, Natalie," I replied smoothly. My voice was calm and perfectly modulated. I did not sound angry. I sounded dangerously bored. Natalie scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest aggressively. "Your assets? You are completely delusional. Harrison cut you off. We all know you are broke. You probably spent your last savings on that green dress just to show up here and beg him for a handout. It is embarrassing, Claire. You look pathetic. Security is going to drag you out of here." The guests standing nearest to us completely stopped pretending to talk among themselves. They were openly staring, captivated by the drama unfolding near the caviar station. Natalie thrived on this attention. She wanted a public screaming match. She wanted me to cry so she could play the victimized sister protecting her successful brother from an unhinged ex-wife. I simply smiled. It was a terrifying, hollow smile. "You talk a lot about other people's money, Natalie," I said, taking a single deliberate step closer to her. "But you have never actually earned a dime of your own. Your entire identity is funded by Harrison's company dividends. You wear those silver sequins like armor, but you are just a dependent living on a corporate allowance." Natalie's face turned a deep shade of crimson. "How dare you speak to me like that? My family built this empire. You were just a temporary employee we finally fired. Go back to your cheap motel before I personally throw you out of this ballroom." I leaned in, slightly lowering my voice, so only she and the eavesdropping executives could hear my next words. "Where is your husband tonight, Natalie? Have you noticed he is not standing next to you?" Natalie blinked, her aggressive posture faltering for a split second, as she instinctively glanced around the room, searching for DeAndre. He was still standing near the private bar, watching our interaction with absolute detached silence. He did not move to defend her. He simply raised his glass of sparkling water toward me in a microscopic toast. "DeAndre is an incredibly smart man," I continued smoothly, keeping my eyes locked on her suddenly uncertain face. "He works in corporate compliance. He knows exactly what happens to people who attach their names to sinking ships. You should really check your personal bank accounts tomorrow morning, Natalie. You might find that the wealthy lifestyle you are bragging about is already gone." "What are you talking about?" she demanded, her voice dropping into a register of genuine panic. "You are completely crazy. You are just trying to cause a scene because Harrison upgraded to a younger, better woman." "I am not causing a scene," I corrected her softly. "I am delivering the final audit." I stepped around her. Natalie did not try to stop me. She stood frozen in place, frantically processing my warning about DeAndre and her bank accounts. I had paralyzed the primary defense line without raising my voice a single decibel. The grand ballroom was now deadly silent. The string quartet stopped playing entirely. The only sound was the rhythmic click of my heels against the polished floor. I approached the center table. Harrison finally turned around, drawn by the sudden silence. His crystal tumbler of scotch stopped halfway to his mouth. The arrogant, victorious smile slid off his face, instantly replaced by sheer, unadulterated shock. He stared at me as if a ghost had just walked through the grand doors. Sienna stood next to him, looking confused. She clutched her diamond bracelet as if it were a protective talisman. "Hello, Harrison," I said loudly, my voice ringing out clear and commanding. "You threw a rather expensive party. I hope you saved the receipts." Harrison's jaw clenched. The color instantly drained from his pale face as he finally realized I was not a broken woman begging for scraps. I was the corporate executioner, and I had just successfully arrived at the gallows. Harrison stepped forward, attempting to grab my elbow and physically steer me away from the center of the room. I sidestepped his grasp with swift precision, refusing to let him touch me. He leaned in his breath, hitting my face as he lowered his voice to an aggressive hiss. "Get out of here right now, Claire," he ordered through gritted teeth. "I will have you arrested for trespassing. You are humiliating yourself." "I am not the one who is about to be humiliated," I replied, my voice projecting effortlessly across the silent ballroom. I did not speak to him in a whisper. I spoke to the entire room, ensuring that every bank executive and corporate partner heard every single syllable. I understand we are gathering tonight to celebrate a massive corporate expansion, I announced, turning away from Harrison to face the crowd directly. We are toasting to a highly anticipated $5 million commercial line of credit, a loan designed to double the logistics fleet and secure regional dominance for this company. I saw the two senior bank vice presidents standing near the private bar exchange a sudden confused glance. They were holding their drinks, suddenly standing very still and paying absolute attention to my words. It is a brilliant business strategy. I continued pacing slowly across the polished marble floor. However, securing a $5 million capital injection requires immense collateral. You cannot just ask a federally insured institution for that kind of money without proving you have the tangible assets to back it up. And my husband needed to prove he was extremely liquid. Harrison moved toward me again, his face now a mask of sheer panic. "Security!" he yelled toward the heavy oak doors. "Get her out of here. She is having a mental breakdown. I am a senior financial auditor," I stated loudly, overpowering his desperate shout. "I do not have mental breakdowns. I conduct forensic accounting, and the accounting for this specific commercial loan is built entirely on federal bank fraud." Loud gasps erupted from the surrounding tables. The clinking of glasses ceased entirely. The word fraud, hanging in the air, acted like an immediate paralyzing agent on the wealthy guests. To secure this loan, I explained, maintaining my clinical, authoritative tone. Harrison leveraged a real estate portfolio managed by a parent holding company, a corporate entity registered with the state exactly 6 months ago under the name Apex Horizon Holdings, LLC. He submitted sworn declarations to the bank, stating this company owned significant unencumbered assets. Specifically, he claimed it owned our $1.2 million primary residence. I paused for a second, letting the financial weight of my words settle over the corporate executives in the room. "The fundamental problem," I said, turning my piercing gaze back to Harrison, who was now sweating profusely under the bright chandelier light, "is that my name is on the original deed to that house. In order to transfer the property into his hidden shell company, Harrison forged my signature on a quitclaim deed. He stole our marital home to use as illegal collateral, shielding it from a divorce settlement while simultaneously committing real estate fraud to secure corporate funding." Harrison was shaking his head rapidly, his hands raised in a defensive, frantic posture. "She is lying. She is a bitter ex-wife making up insane stories because I left her." "I do not tell stories," I fired back instantly. "I bring receipts." I unclasped my sleek designer clutch and pulled out the single piece of paper I had brought with me. It was a blown-up printed copy of the signature block from the Articles of Organization for the Shell Company. I did not need to hand it out to the crowd. I simply held it up in my hand like a loaded weapon. But Harrison is a very cautious man when it comes to signing federal documents. I continued, pivoting my body to face Sienna. She was standing completely frozen at the base of the small platform, her hands still tightly gripping the $15,000 diamond tennis bracelet on her right wrist. He knew that creating a shell company to hide stolen assets was a massive legal liability. He needed a proxy. He needed a registered agent and a managing director who could take the fall if the authorities ever audited the paperwork. He needed someone foolish enough to sign legally binding federal declarations without actually understanding the heavy consequences. Sienna's eyes widened in sheer terror. She took a small, trembling step backward, her expensive crimson dress suddenly looking completely out of place on her shaking frame. "Sienna." I addressed her directly, my voice echoing with absolute finality. "Did you read the paperwork Harrison asked you to sign 6 months ago? Did you bother to consult an independent attorney before you became the sole managing director of Apex Horizon Holdings, LLC? She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked frantically at Harrison, silently begging him to fix this, begging him to protect her from this nightmare. He refused to even look at her. He was staring wildly at the exit, measuring his chances of escape. "Let me explain exactly what you did," I told her, ensuring the entire grand ballroom understood her precise level of complicity. "When you signed the corporate registration documents, you assumed total legal liability for the company operations. When you allowed Harrison to route official corporate mail to my home address bearing your name, you established documented operational residency. And most importantly, when you signed the commercial loan application documents as the managing member offering a stolen house as collateral to a bank, you committed federal wire fraud and bank fraud. Sienna let out a choked gasp. The crystal champagne glass slipped from her hand and shattered loudly against the marble floor. You are not just his girlfriend, I stated, delivering the killing blow with absolute ruthless precision. You are an active co-conspirator in a federal financial crime. Submitting fraudulent declarations to a federally backed institution carries a penalty of up to 30 years in federal prison. He did not buy you that diamond bracelet because he truly loves you. He bought it as a down payment for your complete legal ruin. You are simply his human shield. Sienna let out a high-pitched sob. She turned to Harrison, desperately grabbing the lapels of his custom tuxedo. Tell them it is not true. Tell them I did not do this. Harrison forcefully shoved her hands away, his face twisted in a mixture of ugly rage and sheer panic. Get off of me. You signed the papers. You are the managing director. I have absolutely nothing to do with that LLC. He threw her under the bus instantly, exactly as I knew he would. He was sacrificing her on the spot to save his own skin, desperately clinging to the absurd illusion that he could still escape the blast radius. A wave of disgusted murmurs washed over the gathered crowd. The high society guests were witnessing the spectacular collapse of a corporate fraudster live and in real time. I stood perfectly still, watching the wonderful chaos unfold entirely around me. I had completely dominated the room without raising my hand or shedding a single tear. I had dismantled his fake empire using nothing but the cold, hard truth and the irrefutable power of forensic accounting. I lowered the printed document back into my clutch with deliberate slowness. The powerful men and women in the room who had been shaking his hand just moments prior were now physically stepping away from him. They treated him like an infectious disease. Harrison was a sinking ship and the rats were already fleeing. The beautifully decorated room had transformed into an inescapable trap of his own making, and I was holding the key. I reached into my emerald green tote bag and pulled out a sealed manila envelope bearing the insignia of the United States Department of the Treasury. I walked over to the nearest linen-draped table, picked up a heavy crystal centerpiece, and pinned the federal document directly to the white fabric. You see, Harrison, I said, my voice carrying clearly over the dead silence of the ballroom. I did not just come here tonight to expose your affair. Affairs are cheap. They belong in divorce courts. Federal financial crimes belong to the Internal Revenue Service and the Securities and Exchange Commission. They work fast when an auditor hands them a verified paper trail. I pointed to the manila envelope. That is an official copy of a federal injunction issued at 4 o'clock this afternoon. The government has officially initiated a comprehensive asset freeze on all accounts linked to your logistics firm, your personal portfolio, and Apex Horizon Holdings. The two senior bank vice presidents observing the confrontation suddenly bolted upright, the color drained from their faces. As executives of a federally insured institution, the words asset freeze and federal injunction were their ultimate nightmare. They were drinking champagne paid for by a man who had just used their bank to attempt a $5 million fraud scheme. The silver-haired executive pushed his way to the front of the crowd. His eyes darted from the document to Harrison's sweating face. Is this true? The executive demanded, his voice shaking with professional terror. Did you submit fraudulent property deeds to our underwriting department? Harrison held his hands up, stumbling backward as if the question physically struck him. No. Listen to me. It is a complete misunderstanding. My ex-wife is vindictive. She is forging documents to ruin my business. She does not have the authority to forge a federal injunction, the executive snapped, pulling out his smartphone with trembling fingers. If you leveraged stolen marital assets through our commercial lending division, you have exposed our entire branch to a federal compliance audit. The second executive did not bother asking questions. He was already dialing his phone, barking orders to halt all pending credit line approvals for the logistics firm. The panic was highly contagious. The surrounding investors and corporate vendors began murmuring aggressively, realizing that if Harrison's accounts were frozen, Their outstanding invoices would never be paid. Natalie suddenly pushed her way forward. Her sequined gown flashed under the chandelier light, but she looked entirely disheveled. "Wait!" Natalie shrieked, looking wildly between me and her brother. "If his accounts are frozen, what about my monthly dividend transfers? The automatic payments are supposed to clear tomorrow morning. I have credit card bills. I have mortgage payments." I looked at Natalie with absolute clinical detachment. "Your dividend transfers are sourced directly from his operating capital. If his capital is seized by the federal government pending a fraud investigation, your payments are suspended. I warned you to check your bank accounts. You are officially cut off." Natalie let out a piercing wail and grabbed Harrison's arm. "Tell me she is lying. Tell me my money is safe." Harrison shoved his sister away with the exact same violent disregard he had shown Sienna minutes earlier. He was a cornered animal rapidly losing his grip on reality as his meticulously crafted empire disintegrated before his eyes. He lunged toward the bank executives, attempting to physically block their exit. "Please," Harrison begged, his voice cracking with sheer desperation. "Give me until Monday. I can secure alternative collateral. I can liquidate other assets. Do not pull the funding. If you pull the funding, the supply chain contracts will default by Wednesday." "Get out of my way," the silver-haired executive ordered coldly, signaling for the venue security guards to approach. "Our legal department will be contacting the authorities. Do not ever contact my office again." The executives bypassed him completely, marching out of the grand ballroom without a backward glance. The remaining guests quickly followed suit. Nobody wanted to be photographed at a gala funded by federal fraud. The room was rapidly emptying. People left their coats at the cloakroom. They abandoned their champagne flutes on the tables. The mass exodus was swift, silent, and brutal. Even the catering staff sensed the impending financial doom. The banquet manager stepped out from the kitchen doors, looking at the unfolding disaster with deep concern. He knew a federal asset freeze meant the final payment for tonight's lavish event would bounce immediately. Harrison stood alone in the center of the rapidly emptying ballroom. His breathing was shallow and ragged. Sienna was weeping hysterically by the stage, clutching her phone as she frantically tried to call a lawyer she could not afford. Natalie was slumped in a chair, staring blankly at the floor as she realized her luxurious, dependent lifestyle was completely over. I remained standing perfectly still by the table, my posture perfectly straight. I did not raise my voice. I did not gloat. The sheer mathematics of the situation did all the heavy lifting for me. "You told me I would be eating instant noodles by the end of the week," I said, my voice cutting through the sounds of weeping and retreating footsteps. "You told me I had nothing without you. But you failed to calculate the primary rule of accounting, Harrison. Every fraudulent entry eventually requires a reconciliation. The ledger always balances in the end." Harrison stared at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and realization. He finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. He had challenged a senior financial auditor to a war over assets, and I had simply weaponized his own data to obliterate him. Before he could muster a single response, the heavy oak doors of the grand ballroom swung open with a resounding crash. The private security guard stepped aside, immediately making way for the final phase of my meticulously planned audit. The real authorities had officially arrived now. 4 men and 2 women stepped through the heavy oak doors, their presence instantly draining whatever oxygen remained in the grand ballroom. They were not wearing tailored tuxedos or designer gowns. They wore dark tactical windbreakers with stark yellow lettering printed across their backs. FBI. Behind them stood officers from the Financial Crimes Task Force, their expressions completely devoid of the deferential awe Harrison usually demanded from his guests. The lead agent, a tall man with sharp features and a no-nonsense demeanor, bypassed the abandoned caviar station and walked directly toward the center table. The venue security guards did not dare intervene. They simply parted, allowing the federal agents unimpeded access to the host of the evening. Harrison backed up against the edge of the elevated platform. The crystal tumbler slipped from his grip, shattering against the marble floor. The expensive scotch pooled around his polished leather shoes. He opened his mouth to speak, likely to demand they speak to his attorneys, but the words died in his throat. Harrison, the lead agent, stated, his voice cutting through the dead air with absolute authority. "We have a federal warrant for your arrest regarding multiple counts of wire fraud, bank fraud, and the submission of falsified collateral documents to a federally insured institution. We also have a warrant to seize all corporate devices, ledgers, and physical assets tied to your logistics firm." Natalie let out a piercing shriek from the sidelines. She stumbled forward, her silver sequined dress catching the harsh light. "This is a mistake," she cried out, waving her hands frantically toward the agents. "You cannot just storm in here. My brother is a respected millionaire. My husband is a top corporate lawyer. He works for the bank. DeAndre will destroy you for this." She spun around, scanning the remaining shadows near the private bar. "DeAndre," she screamed. "DeAndre, tell them who you are. Tell them to back off right now." DeAndre stepped out from the shadows. He moved with the slow, deliberate grace of a man who held every single winning card. He did not rush to his wife's side. He did not look concerned. He wore his tailored navy suit like a suit of armor, projecting the absolute unshakable authority of a senior compliance attorney. He walked past Natalie, completely not even acknowledging her desperate reaching hands. He stopped right beside the lead FBI agent and turned to face Harrison. Natalie grabbed his arm. "DeAndre, do something. They are trying to arrest Harrison." DeAndre calmly removed her hand from his sleeve. "I am doing exactly what I am paid to do, Natalie," he said, his deep voice resonating with cold professional detachment. "I am standing here in my official capacity as the senior compliance counsel for the banking institution your brother just attempted to defraud." Natalie froze, her face contorting in sheer confusion. "What are you talking about? You are his family. You are supposed to protect us." "I protect the bank," DeAndre corrected smoothly, "and I protect my own integrity. Harrison submitted fraudulent loan applications directly to my department. He thought because I was his brother-in-law, I would blindly approve a $5 million credit line backed by stolen assets. He assumed I was as ethically bankrupt as he is. That was a catastrophic miscalculation. I flagged the discrepancies, immediately initiated an internal audit, and handed the file directly to the federal task force." Harrison lunged forward, his face purple with rage. "You set me up," he roared, pointing a shaking finger at DeAndre. "You and Claire, you planned this together. You trapped me." "I did not set you up, Harrison." DeAndre replied, his expression entirely unbothered by the outburst. "You committed the fraud completely on your own. You forged your wife's signature on a quitclaim deed. You fabricated your offshore vendor revenue. You instructed your subordinate to act as the managing director of an illegal shell company. I merely handed the federal government the magnifying glass so they could read the fine print you thought you had hidden so well." The lead agent stepped forward, pulling a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. "Harrison, turn around and place your hands behind your back." Harrison resisted, shoving the agent's arm away in a final desperate display of his shattered ego. "Do you know who I am? I run the largest independent logistics fleet in the Midwest sector. I will have your badge for this. My lawyers will have me out before midnight." The agent did not flinch. Two other task force officers immediately stepped in, grabbing Harrison by the shoulders and forcefully turning him around. The sharp metallic click of the handcuffs locking into place echoed loudly in the empty ballroom. It was the sound of an arrogant empire officially terminating its operations. Over by the stage stairs, a female federal agent approached Sienna. The 25-year-old mistress was weeping hysterically, her makeup running down her face in dark streaks. "Are you Sienna, the registered managing director of Apex Horizon Holdings, LLC?" the agent asked, holding up a clipboard. Sienna nodded frantically, her entire body shaking. "I did not do anything," she sobbed, backing away. "I swear I did not know what the papers meant. Harrison told me to sign them. He said it was just a tax strategy. He said he was going to buy me a penthouse. I do not know anything about bank fraud." The agent remained strictly professional. "You signed federal collateral documents under penalty of perjury. Ignorance of the law does not negate your signature. You need to come with us for questioning." Sienna let out a guttural cry and pointed directly at Harrison, who was currently being escorted toward the main doors in handcuffs. "It was his idea," she screamed, completely abandoning any remaining shred of loyalty. "He forced me to do it. He told me he was hiding the house from his crazy wife. I have all his text messages. I will give you my phone. I will give you his laptop passwords. Just please do not put me in jail. I stood quietly near the abandoned caviar station, watching the spectacular chain reaction of betrayal unfold. Harrison had discarded our 7-year marriage for a woman who folded under federal pressure in exactly 45 seconds. He had mocked my career, yet he was currently being destroyed by a compliance lawyer and a financial auditor who had simply utilized basic corporate diligence. DeAndre walked over to where I was standing. He looked at the handcuffed executive, the weeping mistress, and his devastated soon-to-be ex-wife. He turned to me, offering a faint, respectful smile. "The audit is complete, Claire," he said softly. "The books are officially balanced." I looked at Harrison, being dragged out of the grand ballroom, stripped of his wealth, his pride, and his freedom. I nodded slowly. "The books are perfectly balanced," I agreed. "Let us go home." We turned our backs on the ruined grand ballroom and walked toward the exit. The heavy oak doors swung shut behind us, muting the sounds of Natalie weeping and the sharp commands of the federal agents. The hallway outside was lined with additional law enforcement personnel securing the perimeter. DeAndre and I walked side by side in perfect silence, our footsteps echoing against the plush carpet. We did not need to celebrate. The flawless execution of our strategy was satisfaction enough. But the spectacle was not quite over. The freight elevator doors at the end of the corridor chimed open, and the lead FBI agent emerged, physically guiding Harrison by the arm. 2 other agents flanked them. A few paces behind, the female agent escorted Sienna. The 25-year-old logistics coordinator was no longer trying to look like a high society executive. She looked like a terrified child who had just realized she was playing a very dangerous game with the federal government. As they approached the main lobby intersection where DeAndre and I stood waiting for our coats, Sienna abruptly stopped walking. She dug her heels into the carpet and turned toward the lead agent. "I am not going to prison for him," she stated, her voice shaking but suddenly piercingly clear. "I want to make a formal statement right now on the record." Harrison stopped struggling against the agents holding him. He twisted his neck to look at her, his eyes wide with a mixture of betrayal and absolute disbelief. "Sienna, keep your mouth shut," he barked, his voice cracking. "Do not say a single word without a lawyer. You are making it worse." "I am making it worse for you," she fired back, pointing a trembling finger at his face. "I do not care about you, Harrison. You lied to me. You told me the shell company was just a standard tax shield for your real estate investments. You told me putting my name on the documents was a formality to help you bypass corporate red tape. You never told me you stole the house from your wife. You never told me I was signing fake collateral guarantees for a $5 million loan." The female agent pulled out a small digital recorder and held it up. "Go on," she instructed calmly. "He keeps a secondary laptop locked in the bottom drawer of his office desk." Sienna confessed rapidly, her words tumbling out in a desperate bid for immunity. "He uses it to generate the offshore vendor invoices. The password is his own birth date, followed by the word king. He thought it was funny. He bragged to me about how easy it was to inflate the revenue numbers because his ex-wife was no longer around to audit the books. He said she was too stupid to ever figure it out." Harrison let out a primal roar of fury. He lunged toward her, but the 2 federal agents easily restrained him, shoving him back against the marble wall of the corridor. "You treacherous little rat!" he screamed, completely abandoning his polished corporate persona. "I bought you that diamond bracelet. I elevated you. You were nothing before I picked you out of the cubicle. And you are going to be nothing but a federal inmate," Sienna retorted, wiping the ruined mascara from her cheeks. "I have voice memos he sent me on a private messaging application. I have emails where he explicitly instructs me to ignore the compliance warnings from the bank. I will give you everything. I just want full immunity." The lead agent offered a tight professional nod. "Your cooperation will be heavily factored into the prosecutor's decision. Let us get you down to the field office to formalize that statement." Harrison slumped against the cold marble wall. The fight completely drained out of him. The arrogant executive who had kicked me out of my own home in the dead of night, who had mocked my salary and my conservative lifestyle, was entirely gone. He was reduced to a sweating, humiliated criminal, watching his young mistress eagerly trade his freedom for her own survival. He slowly raised his head and locked eyes with me. I stood just 10 feet away, wearing the emerald green dress, my posture perfectly straight. I did not offer him a sympathetic glance. I did not look angry. I simply looked at him the way an auditor looks at a closed, resolved file. "You did this," he whispered, his voice hoarse and broken. "You planned this from the very second you walked out the door." "I did not plan your fraud, Harrison," I replied smoothly, my voice echoing clearly in the quiet hallway. "I just documented it. You built the guillotine. You tied the knot. You placed your own head on the block. I simply pulled the lever." The lead agent gripped Harrison's arm and propelled him forward toward the grand staircase leading to the main lobby. DeAndre and I followed at a leisurely pace, watching the final act of Harrison's public destruction. The main lobby of the plaza was bustling with evening guests, wealthy tourists, and corporate patrons. When the federal agents emerged from the stairwell with a handcuffed man in a custom tuxedo, the entire lobby ground to a halt. People raised their smartphones, snapping photographs and recording videos of the disgraced logistics CEO being marched out the front doors. Harrison tried to duck his head to hide his face from the cameras, but the damage was already done. The man who craved an audience, who desperately needed public validation and high society approval, was getting exactly what he wanted. He was the center of attention. Every single person in the lobby was watching him, but they were not looking at a king. They were looking at a spectacular failure. The federal agents pushed through the revolving glass doors, leading Harrison out into the freezing Chicago night. A row of dark government vehicles waited at the curb, their red and blue lights flashing silently against the falling snow. They forced Harrison into the back of a black sport utility vehicle. The heavy door slammed shut, sealing him inside. Sienna was escorted to a separate car, still crying but clutching the business card the female agent had given her. She had saved herself by utterly destroying him. DeAndre and I stood inside the warm lobby, watching the federal vehicles pull away from the curb and merge into the busy city traffic. The flashing lights disappeared down the street, taking the toxic remnants of my past life with them. DeAndre turned to me, adjusting the cuffs of his navy suit. "I will file the divorce papers against Natalie tomorrow morning. With her primary source of funding officially seized by the federal government, she will not have the capital to contest the custody arrangements. My children will be safe from that environment. And the bank will survive the audit," I added, securing my winter coat around my shoulders. Thanks to a timely whistleblower tip, DeAndre agreed, a genuine smile finally breaking through his serious demeanor. "You execute a flawless audit, Claire." I stepped out through the revolving doors into the crisp winter air. The cold wind bit at my cheeks, but it felt incredibly refreshing. I had walked out of my house 4 weeks ago with nothing but a suitcase and a targeted strategy. Tonight I was walking away completely free. The morning after the gala, the news of Harrison's arrest completely dominated the Chicago corporate media cycle. The spectacular collapse of his logistics empire was rapid, clinical, and entirely merciless. Federal investigators moved with terrifying efficiency, utilizing the exact digital roadmap I had carefully provided in my whistleblower submission. They permanently froze every single banking account linked to his name, physically raided his corporate headquarters, and seized the operational assets of the fraudulent shell company. The $1.2 million suburban house he had so proudly stolen from me was officially locked down under federal jurisdiction. Harrison spent the first 72 hours in a federal holding cell, desperately trying to secure bail using assets he no longer possessed. He attempted to call me from the detention center 6 different times. I simply let the calls route directly to a disconnected automated message. I owed him absolutely no explanations. Sienna proved to be the ultimate liability. I always knew she was. Terrified by the prospect of spending her youth in a federal penitentiary, she eagerly accepted a comprehensive plea agreement from the prosecution. She handed the investigators every single encrypted hard drive, every incriminating text message, and every arrogant voice memo Harrison had ever sent her. She sat in a sterile government deposition room and meticulously detailed exactly how he instructed her to sign the fraudulent collateral documents. She confessed that he orchestrated the entire real estate transfer to hide capital from the divorce courts. Her cooperative testimony was so utterly devastating that Harrison's high-priced defense attorneys quickly realized a public trial would be absolute suicide. His legal team urged him to surrender, facing the very real threat of decades behind bars for orchestrating a massive $5 million bank fraud scheme. Harrison ultimately took a blind plea deal. The federal judge overseeing the case showed absolutely no leniency to an arrogant executive who tried to manipulate the national banking system. Harrison was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. He was stripped of all his corporate titles, banned from serving as a financial fiduciary, and ordered to pay severe financial restitution. The man who had mocked my modest salary was now wearing a standard-issue uniform, living in a tiny concrete cell entirely devoid of his precious luxury. The shockwave of his immediate incarceration completely obliterated his family's toxic foundation. Harrison had been the primary financial engine funding their arrogant lifestyle for years. His logistics company was effectively dismantled and liquidated by federal regulators to pay off the massive government penalties. Without his continuous quarterly dividends, the family's money vanished overnight. Natalie was hit the hardest. She was suddenly cut off from the endless stream of corporate cash she used to constantly maintain her false high society image. Her premium credit cards were immediately declined at local boutiques. The luxury sport utility vehicles she aggressively flaunted on social media were repossessed by the commercial leasing companies within weeks. The family that had so eagerly mocked my hard work and laughed at my midnight eviction was now facing absolute, undeniable bankruptcy. They had built their entire identity on Harrison's stolen wealth, and without it, they were nothing but bitter people actively drowning in severe consumer debt. DeAndre executed his own exit strategy with the exact same ruthless precision we had utilized to dismantle the loan fraud. The very morning after the chaotic gala, he officially filed formal divorce papers. Natalie tried to fight him, screaming that she would take half of everything he owned. She quickly realized she had absolutely no capital to hire competent legal counsel. DeAndre was a senior compliance lawyer who knew exactly how to protect his personal assets from her grasp. Furthermore, DeAndre submitted the vicious social media posts Natalie had written about me as documented evidence of her unstable and highly toxic behavior during the custody hearings. He presented clear records of her reckless financial spending and her aggressive public outbursts. The family court judge recognized the severe danger of exposing young children to such a manipulative and hostile environment. DeAndre easily secured full physical and legal custody of their children. He safely removed his kids from the poisonous environment his in-laws had carefully cultivated for decades. Natalie, entirely stripped of her brother's stolen wealth and her husband's steady income, was forced to move into a tiny, cramped apartment on the outskirts of the city. She lost her social standing, her vanity projects, and her primary audience. She was completely isolated, living a miserable life she had previously told me I deserved. I watched their entire empire burn to the ground from a very safe distance. I did not gloat. I did not send taunting messages. I did not visit Harrison in prison to look at him behind thick glass. I simply closed the book on that horrible chapter of my life. My strategic audit was officially complete. The ledgers were perfectly balanced. Every fraudulent entry had been brutally corrected by the harsh reality of the justice system. My divorce was finalized smoothly and quietly. Since Harrison was a convicted felon whose assets had been seized by the federal government, his original aggressive divorce petition was thrown out. I was legally unburdened from his debts and entirely free from his chaotic web of lies. I sat in my beautifully furnished new apartment, sipping a warm cup of coffee, feeling an immense wave of profound peace. I had survived the worst night of my life by refusing to act like a victim. I had weaponized my intelligence to defeat an arrogant monster. Now there was only one final piece of business left to conclude. The federal government still owed me a massive paycheck for handing them the case. I opened my laptop and checked the secure portal for my final reward. It was time to claim my ultimate prize. I smiled very brightly, knowing my brilliant future was entirely my own, fully funded and wonderfully completely free of their toxic noise. 6 months had passed since the dramatic federal raid that completely shattered my former life. The Internal Revenue Service and the Securities and Exchange Commission operate with a notoriously slow but utterly relentless efficiency. Their specialized task forces had spent the better part of the year meticulously dismantling the fraudulent empire Harrison had tried to build. Between the offshore vendor accounts, the fabricated capital gains, and the liquidated assets of the illegal shell company, the federal government successfully recovered an astounding $14 million in stolen funds and unpaid tax liabilities. Under the federal whistleblower statute, an informant who provides direct, actionable, and verified evidence leading to a successful government recovery is legally entitled to a mandatory percentage of the total seized capital. I received the official encrypted notification from the Treasury Department on a crisp Tuesday morning. Sitting at the sleek desk of my rented apartment, I opened the attached financial settlement document and scrolled directly to the final authorized figure. The United States government was officially awarding me a tax-free payout of $2.8 million. I stared at the pristine digital numbers illuminating my laptop screen. The sheer magnitude of the financial compensation was breathtaking. Harrison had kicked me out of our marital home at 2 a.m, aggressively mocking my professional salary and arrogantly offering me a pathetic $10,000 bribe to walk away quietly. He had challenged my financial acumen and insulted my entire career. In response to his hostility, I had legally inherited a massive fortune directly from the smoldering ashes of his ruined criminal enterprise. The money hit my private banking account exactly 72 hours later. It was entirely clean, completely legitimate, and absolutely indisputable. I did not waste a single dime of that payout on frivolous revenge purchases or flashy sports cars. I am a senior auditor. I build solid, impenetrable financial foundations. My very first major acquisition was a stunning modern penthouse located right in the heart of downtown Chicago. It featured expansive floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the freezing waters of Lake Michigan, sleek, dark hardwood floors, and a massive open-concept chef's kitchen. I bought the luxury property outright, paying in full with a certified bank wire transfer. There were no hidden corporate shell companies, no forged spousal signatures, and no fraudulent commercial collateral loans involved. The property deed was registered strictly and exclusively under my own name. Every single time I walked through that heavy front door, I felt an overwhelming wave of pure independent security. With my personal living situation permanently secured and fully funded, I turned my sharp focus toward my professional future. I was no longer interested in working for a massive corporate firm, crunching numbers in a sterile cubicle to enrich arrogant executives who thought they were above the law. I had proven my exceptional capability in high-level forensic accounting, and I fully intended to capitalize on that precise skill set. I formally launched my own independent financial auditing firm, specializing strictly in corporate compliance, asset recovery, and forensic fraud investigation. I leased a beautiful, spacious corner office on the 40th floor of a prestigious downtown commercial building. I hired a dedicated team of incredibly sharp, ambitious young accountants who shared my ruthless dedication to financial transparency and absolute truth. I designed the entire operational structure of my new company to be flawless, highly efficient, and incredibly lucrative. My first major corporate client referral actually came directly from DeAndre. He sent over a wealthy banking client whose business partner was suspected of aggressively siphoning company funds into a private offshore account. My specialized team dismantled the fraudulent ledgers in less than 2 weeks, exposing the theft and saving the client millions of dollars. Word of my firm's relentless efficiency and discretion spread rapidly through the Chicago financial district. Within 6 months of opening our doors, my firm was operating at maximum capacity, boasting an exclusive wait list of elite corporate clients eager to secure our forensic auditing services. I was no longer just a quiet, supportive wife standing passively in the background at corporate galas. I was the chief executive officer of a highly respected financial firm. I had built my own empire from the ground up, utilizing the exact intellectual skills Harrison had so foolishly despised and underestimated. Occasionally, I would stand by the massive glass windows of my corner office, looking out over the sprawling city skyline, and reflect on the bizarre, chaotic trajectory of my life over the past year. Harrison had desperately wanted to break my spirit. He believed that stripping me of my marital assets and throwing me out into the freezing winter night would reduce me to a desperate weeping victim begging for his mercy. He thought I would completely crumble under the heavy weight of his public rejection and his family's toxic, relentless manipulation. He failed to realize that the most dangerous thing you can do to a highly intelligent, focused woman is strip away her remaining obligations. By violently kicking me out of that house, he did not destroy my life. He merely removed the heavy, suffocating anchor that was holding me back from my true potential. He unwittingly handed me the absolute freedom to operate without restraint, without compromise, and without mercy. Sometimes the absolute best thing you can do when a toxic, narcissistic person challenges you to leave is to calmly pack your bags, walk out the door, and let them proudly set fire to their own kingdom. You do not need to scream, you do not need to argue, and you certainly do not need to seek petty emotional revenge. You just need to protect your assets, gather your irrefutable evidence, and let the harsh, uncompromising reality of the legal system do the heavy lifting for you. Have you ever been pushed to your absolute limit by a manipulator, only to flip the script and completely dismantle their arrogant illusions with nothing but cold, hard facts? Have you ever walked away from a highly toxic situation and built a much better, more successful life strictly on your own terms? Share your triumphant stories and strategies in the comments section down below. Let us celebrate the incredible power of walking away with grace and striking back with undeniable success. If my journey resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories about surviving betrayal, exposing narcissists, and reclaiming your absolute power. Thank you so much for joining me, and always remember to check the footnotes before you declare victory. The story of Claire dismantling her narcissistic husband's fraudulent empire offers a profound lesson on how to navigate toxic manipulation. True power lies in maintaining emotional detachment and relying strictly on undeniable facts. When confronted with sudden betrayal, aggressive gaslighting, and a calculated attempt to destroy her livelihood, Claire's greatest weapon was not anger tears or a dramatic screaming match. Instead, she anchored herself in cold, hard reality. Manipulators thrive on emotional chaos. They actively try to provoke visceral reactions like panic rage or begging because those responses validate their inflated sense of control. Her ex-husband fully expected his cruel midnight eviction and his family's vicious smear campaign to break her spirit, reducing her to a helpless weeping victim. If she had fought back with pure emotion, she would have played right into his hands, fueling his fabricated narrative that she was simply unstable and bitter. By completely removing her emotions from the equation, Claire starved his fire of oxygen. She treated the violent collapse of her marriage not as a personal tragedy, but as a forensic audit. She methodically gathered data, secured her individual assets, and built an impenetrable legal case using clear paper trails. The lesson here is incredibly empowering. You absolutely do not have to participate in the toxic drama someone else attempts to create for you. You have the power to step back, assess the situation with clinical clarity, and let the manipulator's own blind arrogance become their ultimate downfall. Silent strategy and profound self-worth are far more devastating than any retaliatory insult. Take a moment today to evaluate your own personal boundaries and firmly commit to walking away from any relationship that demands you sacrifice your peace to feed their ego.